So as promised, the first story we're going to cover is a very cold case, 36 years old now, from 1982. It's the case of Johnny Gosch. He was a 12-year-old paper boy who was born to the parents John and Noreen Gosch. He lived in West Des Moines, Iowa. It was a very small town. Nothing of any great consequence ever really happened there. By all accounts, it was, a Leave It to Beaver type town, right? And Johnny was a typical 12-year-old. He was working a paper route to get enough money to buy a dirt bike, which he was able to do, which is impressive for a 12-year-old to be that responsible and save their money. My 13-year-old spends all her money really quickly, so that tells you a little bit about Johnny. He was able to save his money up. He was always on time. He was never late for his job. The day before Johnny went missing, he went to a football game for his older brother. And he was with his parents, and he asked them if he could go get some popcorn at the concession stand. And they said yes. And he was gone a little bit too long. So his dad went to look for him, and when he found him, he was talking to a police officer. That wouldn't really set off any red flags for me. I mean, nice little town, he's talking to a police officer, no big deal. But they did ask him to stay within eye range after that. Stand up by the fence so that we can keep our eyes on you and we can see you. And he did. But a short while later, he disappears again. And this time they find him under the bleachers in the dark talking to a police officer. Now at that point, I would have thought this is a little bit weird, especially if it was the same police officer, and I'm not 100% sure if it was or not, but either way, that would have set off alarms. Why are you underneath a bleacher talking to my 12-year-old son? They're getting ready to leave, and Johnny points out that same police officer and says, "That's the police officer I was talking to. He was really nice. Maybe I should be a police officer when I get older." Okay, so maybe that's what they were talking about? I still find it kind of strange. That night they have dinner. Everything is typical in the house. Nothing strange happens. The only one thing was Johnny asked if he could do his paper route in the morning, which he leaves at 5 a.m., 5:30, if he could do it by himself. Now, I can't confirm that they told him no, but that was my assumption based on the story the mom told. So the next morning, they start getting phone calls saying my paper is late. So the natural assumption was Johnny woke up late or something, and they went to check on him. He was not there, his wagon was not there, and neither was his little dog, Gretchen. So the dad says, well, why don't you get ready for the day? I'm going to go find him. I'm going to help him deliver the papers. Maybe he was running late, and we'll take it from there. The dad goes about 2 blocks away, and he finds Johnny's wagon, still full of papers. The dog is attached to the wagon, tied to the wagon, but no Johnny. So immediately he comes back home, and he tells Noreen, call the police. Johnny's gone. I found his wagon, but he's nowhere to be found. So Noreen calls the police. It takes them 45 minutes to get there, although it was only 10 blocks away. Nobody really knows why. You would think in a town that size that was pretty safe, why would it take that long to get there? But in any case, it did. In the meanwhile, she begins to call everybody that she can think of, trying to get any information on what happened to her son. Did any of the newspaper boys see anything? Were there any adults out there? And she was able to get quite a bit of information. People say they saw a blue, older Ford Fairmont car out there, and that car pulled up, and the driver kind of swings his feet out and asks Johnny for directions. And this startled him. And he yells out to an adult who is there, Mr. Rossi, can you help him with these directions? And he walks away. So Mr. Rossi was able to later give a description of this person. But as Johnny's walking away a little while later, Mr. Rossi's already gone. Other people are still there gathering up their stuff. And one witness says, as Johnny was walking away with his newspapers, a man came out from between two houses and looked like he was following Johnny. Yet another witness says they were asleep and heard a loud car door slam. And when they woke up, they looked out and they saw this same blue car, kind of turn right where Johnny was supposedly taken and roll through the stop sign. So those are the witness statements, what they saw, what they knew. Noreen gave all of this information to the police when they finally arrived at her home. And very strangely, the police officer asks her, so has Johnny run away before? And based on everything Noreen now knows, she didn't feel like her son ran away. She never hinted that her son ran away. She should not have given that impression whatsoever. So that statement to her was very strange, and this woman is tenacious. She was not taking that as an answer, that he ran away and that nothing could be done. She was convinced something happened to her son. So because she was convinced of this, and the police were telling her she needed to wait and they thought that he was just a runaway, she began to gather neighbors and friends and try to form a search party. Of course, that's what any parent would do. At this time, they're meeting in a park, and the chief of police shows up. She's initially thinking he must be there to help, but he wasn't. He stood up on a bench and drunkenly yells at the crowd to go home because this was just another runaway. So up until this point, Noreen had never even heard the word pedophile. She wasn't, this was not a big thing as it is today. You're not thinking my son was stolen for this reason. However, there are a ton, and we'll get into that later, of theories on why Johnny was taken. But at this point, the parents are assuming he was taken for ransom. So they're trying to get on TV, they're trying to do interviews, they're saying, we'll pay whatever you want, just contact us, bring our son back. And there were really no leads. About a month after he went missing, Noreen created the Johnny Gosch Foundation, trying to get the word out, trying anything that she could. She often petitioned the FBI to get involved, and they flatly refused her requests. Why, I do not understand, but they did. And 6 months later, a woman claims she saw Johnny, and this was in a totally different state, but that she saw this young boy, and he screams out, "I'm Johnny Gosch, I've been kidnapped." And 2 men come along and grab him and throw him into a car. And things kind of go silent after that point. So over the next several years, Noreen was instrumental in advocating for missing children. She still hadn't heard anything at all about where her son was. He was one of the first children, and if you're my age, you'll remember this, one of the first children to be featured on a milk carton. She was also instrumental in getting some laws passed. The Johnny Gosch law was passed in her home state, where it made it a law that police must respond immediately when a child goes missing. She was also instrumental in the Missing and Exploited Children's program. Reagan actually invited her to the White House. So she never stopped, as any mom, I don't think, would. I mean, I can't imagine when she slept. How do you sleep when your baby is gone, and you know and you hope and you pray that you're going to find him? For years and years, she left her porch lights on. In every interview she did, she would mention that. If you come home, the porch light's on, and we're waiting for you. And I just can't imagine having that level of hope and not hearing anything for so long. Then in 1984, another paper boy for the same paper went missing. His name was Eugene Martin, and He went out at the same time Johnny did, and he was seen talking to this clean-cut man, and he disappeared. And unlike Johnny's case, the FBI did get involved with Eugene's case. The local police did not think that these two cases were related. I don't know. To me, it seems like there was some pretty shoddy work done here by the police. Think about that. Two paper boys, same age, same newspaper, same area, talking to these men, and they go missing. You would think, and the public did think, that these cases were related. So again, as time went on, there were no concrete leads. Not in Eugene's case, not in Johnny's case. One time, Noreen received a dollar bill in the mail. And on it, it said, "I am Johnny Gosch, I am alive." Now, I don't know. As a mom, I'm going to follow every single lead. No matter how crazy it is, I want somebody to investigate it, somebody to look at it, even if it is something like a dollar bill with this writing on it. I want to know, did my son write this? Can you compare the handwriting? What can you do to help me? And people criticized her. You know, they were saying that she was crazy. And I think that if your son has been missing for years and you have no idea where your baby is and you're working nonstop, yeah, you're going to be a little bit crazy. I think that any of us would be at this point. Then in 1986, yet another boy from Des Moines goes missing. And his name, oh, that was a B. His name was Mark Allen, and he was 13 years old. And he kind of bounced back between his mom and his dad's house, and he said he was going to a friend's house, and he was never seen again. So now you've got 3 cases. And now back in the 80s, again, you know, it was beginning to become more common. You know, it's not like today where we have Facebook and YouTube and everything else, and in 2 seconds you can see all the missing children. But for this little town, for 3 boys to go missing just in a matter of a couple of years, I would think that that would set off some alarms, something. But unfortunately for this police department, it really didn't. So in 1991, things take a really strange turn. A man in prison named Paul Bonacci, who was a convicted child predator, came forward and said he took part in the kidnapping of Johnny Gosch. And people thought, because this guy is really strange, that he was just lying, that he was one of those crazy people who were in prison who claimed to have murdered, 100 women, and they couldn't possibly have done it because they were in prison. But he had details. In 1992, America's Most Wanted, John Walsh, he covered the story. He was actually friends with the Gosches at this point, and he covered the story, and he went and spoke to Paul. Paul told him that a man named the Colonel was the one who had Johnny, and that he had seen Johnny himself in 1986. The really crazy part about this is after this episode aired, tons of kids came forward saying they too were sold to this man, the Colonel, and there was a brand on them. They were all branded in the same way. Now, how these kids got away or what happened to them, I don't know. Maybe they were now adults and they were no longer useful. And my understanding is, from kids who are tortured in this way, your mind has become warped. You're not just going to come out and tell. My own personal experience says that it's much easier not to say anything. It's much easier because you don't want to have to defend yourself. You don't want to have to explain. Just look today at the Me Too movement, right? It took one person to come out, and then slowly but surely other people begin to come out. And if you yourself have not been, and molested is a very soft word for this. These kids were not molested. These kids were used as sex slaves. So just from being molested, you don't want anybody asking you. You don't want to discuss it. It's not something that you feel comfortable with. Because even in the people who are not professional, you know, a family member, or whoever it is, they tell you crazy things that could happen. You know, if you tell this, this, and this. So can you imagine an organized ring? You are absolutely staying as far away from that topic as you possibly can. So America's Most Wanted made it okay for them to come out and say, yes, you know, this happened to me as well, and this is what happened, and I was branded, and it was the same person. So that kind of backed up Paul's story even further.
And they photograph it, they film it. The whole purpose for that is to either blackmail you into staying with them or split your mind up so that you don't even remember who you are.
The FBI has been informed as to everything that has come out of Bonaci's mouth, and that was done by his attorney, John DeCamp.
I submitted it to them, and it was like a forbidden zone I'd entered where they won't even communicate on it or talk to you or even reply.
The reason the FBI won't discuss Bonacci is that they feel he is an uncredible witness because of his role in a sex scandal that rocked Omaha. In 1989, the Franklin Credit Union scandal burst into the headlines. Paul Bonacci was one of the witnesses who made shocking allegations of child sexual abuse by some of Omaha's most influential citizens.
So back to Paul Bonacci. In 1999, he filed a suit. Now, this is all related to the Franklin cover-up, and again, you are totally free to go research that, and we may do that later. But for some reason, Noreen was called as a witness. And while she was on the stand and under oath, they asked her if she'd ever seen Johnny after he went missing. And she kind of hesitated for a while, but she was under oath, so she did tell the truth. She told them that in 1997, her son came to her house. He showed her his scars. You know, obviously, so many years later, you look very different. He showed his scars. She knew right away from his eyes that it was him. He said he got away for a while, and he was with another man, and he kind of kept looking to that man for approval to speak. And he only stayed there about an hour and a half, and he told her that he was sold into sex trafficking, and he was made to do absolutely horrible things. She said he was very angry, very broken, that he refused to go to the police, and he did not want her to do that either. And as a mom, I think you want to hold on. You know, you want to hold him there as long as you can. But if he's telling you all of these graphic, horrible things, and then tells you can't call the police, you can't tell anybody about this, Mom, what do you do? I wouldn't want to put my son in danger, so I guess I would have respected his wishes too. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. And I hate that people took her words and turned this against her, further calling her crazy, further saying that she should have told somebody. You know, you have to be a mama. You have to be a mama to know how much you want to protect your child. And I think that that's all she wanted to do, was protect her baby. So, to conclude the video, there are tons of conspiracy theories out there about Johnny and James, is what I was going to say, because there is a man named James who worked in the White House, and he was a White House reporter. He was right there, you know, that's a coveted position. James Gannon. And some people swear Johnny is now James. The reason they say this is because he really didn't have any credentials. The Bushes were supposedly involved in this huge sex trafficking ring. There are pictures of President Bush like kissing James Gannon on the head. You know, the man's been raked over the coals. Like, who are you? You don't have credentials. How did you land this job? And he's very evasive when answering these questions. So that is just a conspiracy theory that's out there. You can look into that if you want. Obviously, the other ones are that he was taken by a local pedophile and probably killed. But there's no body, and there's no proof of that. Now, people will also say, well, there's no proof that there's this organized ring of pedophiles. And again, it's a very taboo subject. People don't want to believe that. People don't want to believe that the government or that stars or, you know, anybody in a position of admiration or authority would ever do these things. I just want you to think about this for a second. They say most kids are molested by a family member. Now, aren't your family members supposed to love you? Yet they would do that. What would it take for a stranger to do it? You know, I have an app on my phone that shows all the sex predators just in my little neighborhood, and there are a lot. So for me, I 1000% believe organized sex trafficking is a real thing. It's a huge problem, and it exists. Personally, I do think that Paul Bonacci was telling the truth. I just think that he had way too many details and he knew too much. And also, if his mama believes it, I'm with her. I don't think that the woman's crazy. I think that she's worked her butt off with very little help. So hopefully one day this case is solved. But as of right now, he may still be out there somewhere. And there's nothing we can do about it. But I did want to give you the details, and I'm going to give you some links to go look at, and maybe this case will grab you the same way that it's grabbed me, and you may want to look into it further.